The thunder cracked across the Montana sky like a whip, as Olivia Winters clutched her infant daughter tighter against her chest, the tattered shawl doing little to shield either of them from the relentless downpour. Her tears mingled with the rain streaming down her face, making it impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. The muddy road stretched endlessly before her, each step more difficult than the last as her worn boots sank into the mire of the rutted trail. It was 1876, 3 years since she'd left Boston with dreams of a new life in the West. Now, at 22, those dreams lay shattered around her like the remnants of the life she'd tried to build with a man who'd proven as false as fool's gold. "Hush now, Emma," she whispered to the 6-month-old bundle whimpering against her. "We'll find shelter soon." The words rang hollow even to her own ears. They were miles from the nearest town, and the storm showed no signs of abating. Her husband Thomas had abandoned them 2 days prior, taking their horse, their savings, and whatever remained of Olivia's belief in happy endings. The sound of hoofbeats approaching from behind barely registered through the drumming rain. Olivia moved to the side of the road, keeping her head down. Lone travelers were common enough on these trails, but a woman alone with a child was vulnerable in ways she'd come to understand all too well. The rider slowed as he approached, and Olivia clutched Emma tighter, ready to flee into the woods if necessary. The horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion, came to a halt beside her. "Madam," the voice was deep, carrying a hint of Texas in its careful drawl, "you shouldn't be out in this weather." Olivia looked up, blinking rainwater from her eyes. The man sat tall in his saddle, water streaming from the brim of his hat. His face was partially shadowed, but she could make out a strong jaw darkened with several days' worth of stubble. "I have no choice," she replied, her voice barely audible above the storm. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his considerable height. "Name's Preston Reed," he said, approaching slowly as if worried he might frighten her. "You and that baby need shelter." Olivia took a step back. "We're fine." Preston Reed tilted his head slightly, rainwater cascading from his hat brim. "With all due respect, madam, you're about as far from fine as a person can get." The baby let out a wail then, as if to confirm his assessment. Olivia tried to soothe her, but Emma's cries grew more insistent. The cold and wet had become too much. "My ranch is about 3 miles up this road," Preston said, gesturing with a gloved hand. "There's a warm fire, dry clothes, and hot food." He paused, then added, "No strings attached. You can leave at first light if you want." Olivia hesitated. Her options were painfully limited. Emma's forehead felt warm against her neck despite the cold rain, the beginning of a fever, perhaps. The thought of her daughter suffering because of pride was unbearable. "I don't need charity," she said, even as her body swayed with exhaustion. "It's not charity to help a neighbor in need," Preston replied. "It's what decent folk do." He moved closer, standing now just a foot away. "May I?" he asked, extending his arms toward her and the baby. Something in his eyes, a steadiness, an absence of the hunger she'd learned to recognize in men, made her nod slightly. Preston carefully took Emma, cradling her with surprising gentleness for hands so large and weathered. He quickly tucked the infant inside his long duster, providing immediate shelter from the rain. "Your turn," he said, turning back to Olivia. Before she could protest, he had lifted her by the waist and placed her on his horse with a strength that made the action seem effortless. He handed Emma back to her, then mounted behind, one arm reaching around to take the reins while the other steadied her. "Hold on," he instructed, urging the horse forward. As they rode through the storm, Olivia found herself leaning back against the solid warmth of Preston Reed's chest, too exhausted to maintain her rigid posture. Emma had quieted, soothed by the rhythmic motion of the horse and the newfound dryness under the cowboy's coat. The ranch appeared through the rain as a collection of sturdy buildings nestled against the foothills. The main house was larger than Olivia had expected, built of solid timber with a wide porch wrapping around its front. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising the warmth Preston had mentioned. He guided the horse directly to the house, dismounting quickly before helping Olivia down. The porch provided immediate relief from the downpour, and Olivia felt a moment of disorientation at the sudden absence of rain on her face. Preston opened the door, ushering her inside. "Mrs. Norwood," he called out, "we have guests in need of assistance." A woman in her 60s emerged from what appeared to be the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes widened at the sight of Olivia and the baby. "Goodness gracious," she exclaimed, immediately taking charge. "Bring them by the fire, Mr. Reed. I'll fetch towels and dry clothes." Preston guided Olivia to a large stone fireplace where flames leaped and crackled, casting the room in a golden glow. The warmth reached for her like welcoming hands. "Mrs. Norwood is my housekeeper," Preston explained, taking a step back. "She'll help you and the little one get dried and changed. I'll see to my horse and be back shortly." Before Olivia could thank him, he was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Mrs. Norwood returned with an armload of towels and clothing. "Let's see to that baby first," she said kindly. "Poor mite sounds congested." Indeed, Emma's breathing had a worrying rattle to it. Olivia surrendered her daughter to Mrs. Norwood's capable hands, watching anxiously as the older woman unwrapped the sodden blankets. "She's a beautiful child," Mrs. Norwood commented, efficiently drying Emma and wrapping her in fresh, warm flannel. "What's her name?" "Emma," Olivia replied, accepting a towel for herself. "She's 6 months old." Mrs. Norwood nodded, examining the baby with gentle thoroughness. "She's got a slight fever, but nothing too concerning yet. A warm, dry night and some willow bark tea should set her right." She handed Emma back to Olivia. "Now, let's get you changed before you catch your death." The borrowed dress was simple but clean and warm, if a bit large. Mrs. Norwood brought a brush for Olivia's long auburn hair, which she dried by the fire as Emma dozed in her arms, wrapped in fresh blankets. By the time Preston returned, Olivia looked almost like a different woman. The fire had brought color back to her cheeks, and her hair fell in damp waves around her shoulders. Preston had changed as well, his rain-soaked clothes replaced by clean trousers and a flannel shirt, his dark hair still damp at the ends. He paused momentarily upon seeing her, then crossed to the fire, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Norwood has prepared a room for you and the little one," he said, "and there's stew if you're hungry." "Thank you, Mr. Reed," Olivia replied formally. "But I should explain. No need for explanations tonight," he interrupted gently. "You're exhausted and that baby needs rest. Whatever brought you to that road in the rain can wait until morning." Mrs. Norwood appeared with a tray bearing bowls of fragrant stew and fresh bread. "Eat first, talk later," she insisted, setting the tray on a small table near the fire. The stew was the most delicious thing Olivia had tasted in months, rich with beef and vegetables from Preston's ranch. She ate with the focused intensity of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days, only realizing when she finished that Preston had been watching her with concern in his eyes. "When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. "Yesterday morning," she admitted. "We had some jerky, but it's gone now." Preston's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more about it. Instead, he asked, "What's your daughter's name?" "Emma," Olivia replied, glancing down at the sleeping infant in her arms. "Emma Rose." "A beautiful name," he said, his voice softening. "And yours?" "Olivia," Olivia Winters. She hesitated, then added, formerly Olivia Becker. Preston nodded, seeming to understand the implication. Well, Mrs. Winters, you and Emma Rose are welcome to stay as long as you need. After the meal, Mrs. Norwood showed Olivia to a comfortable bedroom on the second floor. A small cradle had been placed beside the bed, and a fire burned cheerfully in the grate. Mr. Reed had this room prepared when his sister was expecting, Mrs. Norwood explained, turning down the bed. Sadly, she lost the baby and never came to visit. The cradle was meant to be a gift. Olivia felt a pang of sympathy. That's terribly sad. Yes, it was a difficult time. Mr. Reed takes family seriously. Mrs. Norwood arranged the pillows. He's a good man, Mrs. Winters, one of the best I've known in my 63 years. She paused, then added, whatever trouble you're running from, you're safe here. The words brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. Thank you. Sleep well. I'll be just down the hall if you need anything for the baby. Left alone, Olivia placed Emma in the cradle, tucking the blankets around her. The baby's breathing seemed easier already, her tiny features relaxed in sleep. Olivia climbed into the bed, the clean sheets and soft mattress feeling like unimaginable luxury after nights spent on the hard ground or in shabby roadside inns. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her. The events of the past days played through her mind. Thomas's escalating drinking, his fury when she confronted him about gambling away their savings, his final cruel words before he rode away, leaving them with nothing but a small bundle of possessions. A soft knock at the door startled her from these dark thoughts. Preston stood in the hallway, holding a small bottle and cup. Mrs. Norwood sent this up for Emma, he explained. Willow bark tea with honey. She says to give her a spoonful every few hours for the fever. Olivia accepted the items. You've both been very kind, Preston shrugged. Anyone would do the same. No, Olivia said quietly. They wouldn't. She had learned that harsh lesson repeatedly since coming west. He studied her for a moment. You should get some rest, Mrs. Winters. Things often look different in the morning light. After he left, Olivia administered a spoonful of the tea to Emma, who swallowed it without fully waking. Then she returned to bed, listening to the rain drumming against the windows and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. For the first time in days, she felt something resembling safety. It was temporary. She knew tomorrow would bring decisions and explanations, but for tonight, at least, she and Emma were warm, dry, and protected. Sleep claimed her at last, dreamless and deep. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the windows. Olivia woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was. Emma's happy gurgling from the cradle brought reality back in a rush. The baby seemed remarkably improved, her eyes bright and her cheeks pink with health rather than fever. Olivia found a simple calico dress laid out for her, along with a knitted shawl and soft leather shoes that looked barely worn. After dressing and attending to Emma, she made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was warm and inviting, with copper pots hanging from hooks and herbs drying in bunches near the window. Mrs. Norwood stood at the stove, turning bacon in a large cast iron skillet. "Good morning, dear," she greeted Olivia. "You look much better after a night's rest. And how's the little one?" "Much better, thanks to your remedy," Olivia replied. "Her fever is gone." "Wonderful. Sit down, breakfast is nearly ready. Mr. Reed is out checking the herd, but he'll be back shortly." Olivia settled at the kitchen table with Emma on her lap. Mrs. Norwood placed a cup of coffee before her, then returned to her cooking. "Have you been with Mr. Reed long?" Olivia asked after taking a grateful sip of the strong brew. "Nearly 10 years now," Mrs. Norwood replied. "Since his parents passed within months of each other." I was their housekeeper before and just stayed on. He was only 23 then, suddenly responsible for the entire ranch. He seems to have managed well, Olivia observed, looking around the well-maintained home. Indeed he has. Built it up considerably, in fact. The Diamond R is one of the most successful ranches in the territory now. Mrs. Norwood glanced at Olivia. But he works too hard, rarely takes time for himself. Before Olivia could respond, the back door opened and Preston entered, bringing with him the scent of morning air and horses. He removed his hat, hanging it on a peg by the door. "Good morning," he said, nodding to both women. His eyes lingered briefly on Olivia and Emma before he moved to wash his hands at the basin. "Perfect timing, Mr. Reed," Mrs. Norwood announced, setting a platter of bacon, eggs, and biscuits on the table. "Sit down while it's hot." The meal passed pleasantly, with Preston inquiring after Emma's health and expressing satisfaction at her improvement. It was only as Mrs. Norwood cleared the dishes that he broached the subject Olivia had been dreading. "Mrs. Winters," he began, his tone gentle but direct, "I don't mean to pry, but I need to understand your situation. A woman and baby alone on that road." He left the sentence unfinished. Olivia took a deep breath. "My husband abandoned us 3 days ago. We were traveling to Helena, where he claimed to have prospects. But Thomas, he has a weakness for gambling and whiskey. He lost our money, then took what little we had left, including our horse, and rode off." Preston's expression darkened. "Leaving you and an infant to fend for yourselves miles from anywhere." "Yes." Olivia lifted her chin slightly. "I kept walking, hoping to reach the next town. Then the storm came." "And where were you headed before Helena?" he asked. "We had a small homestead near Bannack," she explained. "But we lost it. Thomas borrowed against the property without telling me, when we couldn't repay the loan." She shrugged, the gesture conveying the inevitability of what had followed. Preston was silent for a moment, considering. "Do you have family you can go to?" "No. My parents died of influenza when I was 18. I came west with Thomas shortly after. We married in Boston and headed to Montana to start a new life." The irony of how that dream had ended wasn't lost on her. "I see." Preston's fingers drummed briefly on the table. "Well, you're welcome to stay here until you decide what to do next. The ranch is busy this time of year, calving season, and Mrs. Norwood could probably use an extra pair of hands." Olivia straightened. "I can work, Mr. Reed. I'm not afraid of hard labor, and I can pay my way." Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "I don't doubt it, Mrs. Winters. But for now, just rest and recover. There's time enough to discuss arrangements." After breakfast, Preston excused himself to return to his work. Olivia insisted on helping Mrs. Norwood with the dishes and other kitchen chores, Emma contentedly playing with a wooden spoon on a blanket spread nearby. "He's not usually so quick to invite strangers to stay," Mrs. Norwood commented as they worked. "Mr. Reed tends to keep to himself." "I'm grateful for his kindness," Olivia replied, "but we won't impose for long." Mrs. Norwood gave her a shrewd look. "Where will you go?" The question struck Olivia silent. She had no answer, no plan beyond the desperate need to keep moving forward that had driven her through the rain yesterday. "I don't know," she admitted finally, "but I'll figure something out. I always do." The day passed quickly as Olivia assisted Mrs. Norwood with household tasks. The work was familiar and comforting: laundry, bread making, preserving the early summer berries Mrs. Norwood had picked the previous day. Emma napped and played, clearly thriving in the peaceful environment. Late in the afternoon, Olivia stepped onto the porch for a moment of quiet. The ranch spread before her in a panorama of green pastures and distant mountains, cattle grazing in the lower fields. The storm had cleared completely, leaving the landscape washed clean and vibrant under the summer sun. Movement caught her eye. Preston riding in from the east pasture, accompanied by two other men on horseback. They separated at the barn, the ranch hands leading their horses inside while Preston dismounted and headed toward the house. He noticed her on the porch and altered his course, approaching with the same measured stride she'd observed yesterday. Up close, in daylight, she could better appreciate his features, strong and weathered from years of outdoor work, with eyes the deep blue-gray of a mountain lake. His dark hair curled slightly where it touched his collar. "How are you finding everything, Mrs. Winters?" he asked, stopping at the foot of the steps. "Very well, thank you. Mrs. Norwood has been most welcoming." Preston nodded. "She's pleased to have another woman around. It gets lonely for her out here, I think." "You have a beautiful ranch," Olivia said, gazing out at the vista. "Thank you. My father started it with just 50 acres and 20 head of cattle. We're up to 2,000 acres now." There was justified pride in his voice. "You've accomplished a great deal." A smile briefly transformed his serious face. "We work hard, Mr. Reed," Olivia began, deciding to address the situation directly. "I want to thank you again for your help yesterday, but I don't want to take advantage of your generosity. If you could point me toward employment opportunities in the nearest town, Mrs. Winters," he interrupted gently. "There's no need to rush. The nearest town is Sweetwater, 15 miles east, and while it's decent enough, opportunities for a woman alone with a child are limited." His tone made clear what kind of opportunities might be available. "I'm not afraid of hard work," she repeated her earlier assertion. "I don't doubt that for a moment." He considered her for a second. "Can you ride?" "Yes, quite well. My father taught me as a girl." "Good. Tomorrow, if you're willing, I'll show you the ranch. Then perhaps we can discuss how you might fit in here if that's what you decide." Before she could respond, Emma's cries drifted through the open window. "I should tend to her," Olivia said. Preston nodded. "Of course. We'll talk more at supper." That evening's meal was more substantial than breakfast, with a roast, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. Preston ate with the focused efficiency of a man accustomed to regarding food as necessary fuel rather than pleasure. Still, he complimented Mrs. Norwood's cooking and engaged Olivia in polite conversation about her life before coming west. She shared carefully edited stories of her childhood in Boston, where her father had been a moderately successful merchant. Preston, in turn, spoke of growing up on the ranch, learning the cattle business from his father. "It wasn't always easy," he admitted. "We had some lean years, especially during the war, but my father was determined to build something lasting. And you've continued his legacy admirably, Mrs. Norwood interjected with obvious pride. Preston looked almost embarrassed by the praise. "I've been fortunate. Good land. Good men working with me." After dinner, they moved to the sitting room where Mrs. Norwood took Emma to allow Olivia a brief respite. The baby had grown attached to the older woman already, gurgling happily in her arms. Left alone with Preston, Olivia felt a sudden awkwardness. He seemed to share the feeling, standing by the fireplace with a slight stiffness to his posture. "Mrs. Winters," he began after a moment, "I hope you don't find my next question intrusive, but I need to ask. Is there any chance your husband might come looking for you?" The question startled her. "Thomas? No, I don't believe so. He made his feelings quite clear when he left." Preston nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. That's good. You were concerned he might cause trouble?" Olivia asked. "I've seen men change their minds before, come back when it suits them." There was something in his tone, a personal knowledge that went beyond general observation. "Thomas won't be back," Olivia said with certainty. "He's not the type to reconsider once he's made a decision, especially when it involves responsibility." Preston studied her for a moment. "You speak of him without bitterness." "I save my bitterness for myself," she replied honestly. "For being foolish enough to believe in him for so long." "That's not foolishness, Mrs. Winters. That's loyalty, a rare quality." Their eyes met briefly, and Olivia felt a strange flutter in her chest. She looked away first, uncomfortable with the sensation. "Mr. Reed," she said, changing the subject, "if I stay on temporarily, I insist on working. Not just helping Mrs. Norwood, but contributing in a meaningful way." He considered this. "Can you keep accounts? Read and write well?" "Yes, very well. My father insisted on a thorough education." "Then perhaps you could help with the ranch ledgers. Mine are a disaster, according to the bank in Sweetwater." He gave a self-deprecating smile. "I can run cattle, but bookkeeping is not my strength." "I would be happy to assist with that," Olivia said, pleased at the prospect of using her education. "We'll start tomorrow, then, after I show you the ranch." When Mrs. Norwood returned with a sleepy Emma, Olivia excused herself to put the baby to bed. As she climbed the stairs, she was acutely aware of Preston's gaze following her in her room. As she settled Emma for the night, Olivia reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she had been trudging through the rain, certain that she and Emma faced disaster. Now she was contemplating a position at a prosperous ranch, with a roof over their heads and food in their bellies. She knew it was temporary. Preston had made no promises beyond the immediate future, but for the first time in months, Olivia felt something like hope. She would work hard, save whatever wages Preston offered, and eventually find a permanent situation for herself and Emma. Perhaps in a larger town, where she might find employment as a teacher or shopkeeper. As she lay in bed, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the cradle, Olivia pushed away thoughts of Preston Reed's startling blue eyes and the strange comfort she'd felt riding against his chest through the rain. Such thoughts were dangerous. She had learned the hard way that depending on a man led only to disappointment. No, she would accept his help temporarily, but her future and Emma's would be secured by her own efforts. That was the only safety she could trust. Morning came with the crowing of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. Olivia dressed in the sturdiest of the clothes. Mrs. Norwood had provided a blue calico dress with a practical split skirt that would allow for riding. She braided her hair tightly and covered it with a simple bonnet to protect against the sun. After breakfast, Preston led her to the barn, where a gentle mare named Daisy stood saddled and waiting. Olivia settled Emma in a makeshift carrier Mrs. Norwood had fashioned, securing the baby against her chest. "Are you sure she'll be all right?" Preston asked, eyeing the arrangement with concern. "She'll be fine," Olivia assured him. "She loves movement. It puts her right to sleep most times." True to her word, Emma dozed off shortly after they began their ride, lulled by the gentle motion of the horse beneath them. Preston kept a slow pace, pointing out features of the ranch as they rode. The Diamond R spread across rolling hills and valleys, with the mountains rising majestically in the west. Preston had divided the land efficiently, grazing pastures, hay fields, a creek running through the property providing ample water. There were several outbuildings beyond the main house and barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, a smithy, storage sheds, and corrals. "We run about 800 head of cattle now," Preston explained as they paused on a hilltop overlooking a valley where black and brown cattle grazed. "Mostly Herefords and Angus, better meat yield than Longhorns." "It's impressive," Olivia said, genuinely awed by the scale of the operation. "How many men work for you?" 6 full-time hands plus extra help during roundup and branding." Preston pointed to where 2 men on horseback were moving a small group of cattle toward a different pasture. That's Jackson and Miller. Good men, been with me 5 years now. They continued their tour, Preston explaining the seasonal cycle of ranch work calving in early spring, branding, summer grazing, fall roundup, and winter feeding. Olivia listened attentively, asking questions that seemed to please him with their insight. "You understand ranching better than most city folk," he commented as they turned back toward the house. "I lived on a homestead for 2 years," she reminded him. "It was small, but the principles are the same, and I've always been a quick study." Preston nodded. "That you are." Back at the house, they shared a simple lunch with Mrs. Norwood, who had prepared cold chicken and fresh bread. Afterward, Preston led Olivia to a small room off the main sitting area that served as his office. The space was functional rather than decorative, with a solid desk, several filing cabinets and bookshelves filled with agricultural journals and record books. A large map of Montana territory hung on one wall, with the Diamond R boundaries clearly marked. "Here's where the real battle is fought," Preston said with a rueful smile, gesturing to the stacks of papers on his desk. "I'd rather face a stampede than these." Olivia surveyed the chaos with a practiced eye. "It's not so bad, just needs organization. That's what I'm hoping you can provide." He pulled out a chair for her. "These are the current ledgers. The bank needs updated accounts by the end of the month for a loan renewal." For the next several hours, Olivia immersed herself in the ranch's financial records. Emma napped in a basket Mrs. Norwood had lined with soft blankets, occasionally waking for feeding or attention, but generally content to observe the new surroundings. Preston worked alongside Olivia, answering questions about particular transactions and explaining the ranch's income streams and expenses. She was impressed by the operation's profitability. The Diamond R was clearly well managed despite the disorganized bookkeeping. "You've done remarkably well," she commented, reviewing the previous year's figures, "especially considering the drought last summer. We were lucky. The creek never fully dried up and we'd stockpiled enough hay to see us through." Preston leaned back in his chair, stretching. "Many neighboring ranches weren't so fortunate." "It's not luck, it's good planning," Olivia corrected him. "You anticipated the problem and prepared accordingly." He seemed pleased by her assessment. "My father always said a rancher needs to think a full season ahead at minimum." Wise advice. Olivia made a final note in the ledger and closed it. "I think I understand your system now, such as it is. With your permission, I'd like to implement some changes to make the accounting clearer." "You have complete authority," Preston said immediately. "Do whatever you think best. The bank will be grateful and so will I." Their eyes met across the desk and again Olivia felt that strange flutter in her chest. She looked down quickly, arranging the papers before her into neat stacks. "I should check on Emma," she said, rising. Preston stood as well. "Of course. We've worked enough for one day." That evening after dinner, Preston brought out a chess set, its pieces carved from pale and dark wood. "Do you play?" he asked Olivia. "My father taught me," she replied, "though I haven't played in years. Would you care for a game? It helps clear the mind after a day of figures." They set up the board by the fireplace, the warm light gleaming on the polished pieces. Preston played thoughtfully but not aggressively, making the occasional deliberate mistake that Olivia suspected was intended to prolong their game. "You're being kind," she said after capturing his knight too easily. He looked up, surprised. "What do you mean? You could have blocked that move easily. You're letting me win." A slow smile spread across his face. "Mrs. Winters, I assure you I never deliberately lose at anything. If I made an error, it's because your strategy distracted me." Something in his tone made her cheeks warm. "Then I apologize for the accusation." "No apology needed. It's refreshing to play with someone who notices such things." They continued their game, the conversation flowing more easily than before. Preston asked about her life in Boston, and Olivia found herself sharing stories of her childhood sailing in the harbor with her father, attending lectures at the Athenaeum, the books she had loved. "You must miss city life," Preston remarked as he considered his next move. "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "I miss the libraries most of all, I think. And the music. We have books," Preston said, gesturing to the shelves lining one wall of the sitting room. "My mother was a great reader." "Feel free to borrow anything that interests you. Thank you. I would enjoy that." Preston moved his queen, then sat back. "Check." Olivia examined the board with surprise, then laughed. "You weren't being kind after all." "Never," he agreed with a smile. She studied the board, finding her escape route. "Not checkmate yet, Mr. Reed." They played until the fire burned low, each winning one game. When Emma began to fuss, signaling her bedtime, Olivia reluctantly excused herself. "Thank you for the games," she said as she gathered Emma into her arms. "It's been a long time since I've had such pleasant competition." "The pleasure was mine," Preston replied, standing as she rose. "Perhaps we can make it a regular occurrence." Upstairs, as Olivia prepared Emma for bed, she found herself humming softly, a habit she had abandoned months ago when worry had overwhelmed any inclination toward music. The realization gave her pause. It would be dangerous to become too comfortable here, she reminded herself. This arrangement was temporary. Preston had been kind, but kindness did not equal permanence. She needed to focus on building a future for herself and Emma that didn't depend on anyone else's goodwill. Still, as she drifted off to sleep, Olivia couldn't help but recall the warmth in Preston's eyes when he'd looked at her across the chessboard, a warmth that had nothing to do with pity or obligation. The next few weeks established a routine. Mornings were devoted to reorganizing the ranch accounts, with Olivia creating a new system that tracked expenses and income more efficiently. Afternoons often found her helping Mrs. Norwood with household tasks or accompanying Preston on rides around the property. Emma securely nestled against her chest. The baby thrived in the ranch environment, growing stronger and more alert each day. She had begun to sit up on her own and would soon be crawling, much to Mrs. Norwood's delight. The older woman had become thoroughly attached to Emma, treating her with a grandmother's doting attention. Preston, too, showed a surprising affinity for the child. Though initially awkward, he had learned to hold Emma confidently, sometimes carrying her around the ranch office while Olivia worked on the ledgers. Emma seemed fascinated by his deep voice and would stare at him with wide-eyed attention when he spoke. "She likes you," Olivia commented one afternoon, watching as Preston gently bounced Emma on his knee. "The feeling is mutual," he replied, smiling as Emma grabbed at his shirt buttons. "She's a remarkable child, so alert and curious." "She reminds me of my father," Olivia said. He had that same determined expression when confronted with something new. Preston studied Emma's face. "I see a great deal of her mother in her as well." The comment, delivered with quiet sincerity, brought a flush to Olivia's cheeks. Before she could respond, the office door opened, and one of the ranch hands appeared. "Sorry to interrupt, boss, but there's trouble at the north pasture. Some of Blackwell's cattle have broken through the fence again." Preston's expression darkened. He carefully handed Emma back to Olivia. "I need to handle this. Blackwell's been pushing boundaries literally for months." "Who is Blackwell?" Olivia asked, settling Emma on her hip. "Neighbor to the north. Wants my water rights and isn't particular about how he gets them." Preston grabbed his hat from the desk. "Don't wait dinner for me. This might take a while." After he left, Olivia continued working on the accounts, but her mind kept returning to the tension she'd seen in Preston's face. When Mrs. Norwood brought tea an hour later, Olivia asked about the situation. "James Blackwell, Mrs. Norwood said with evident distaste. "Moved in 3 years ago, been causing trouble ever since. His ranch is poorly managed, and he's constantly short of water because he won't invest in proper irrigation. So he tries to push his cattle onto Diamond R land." "Has he always been so aggressive, Mrs.?" Norwood set down her teacup. "It's gotten worse since Mr. Reed refused to sell him the North Creek last year. That man has no scruples. There've been threats." "Threats?" Olivia felt a chill. "Of violence. Nothing direct enough to involve the law, but yes, Mr. Reed doesn't speak of it, but I know he's concerned. He's taken to carrying his rifle when he rides that part of the property." The revelation disturbed Olivia deeply. The Diamond R had come to feel like a safe haven, and the thought of danger approaching its borders was unsettling. Preston didn't return until well after dark. Olivia, unable to sleep, had gone downstairs for a book and was reading by the dying fire when he entered, looking weary and grim. "You're still up," he said, sounding surprised. "I was worried," she admitted. "Mrs. Norwood told me about Blackwell." Preston sighed, removing his hat and coat. "She shouldn't have troubled you with that. Is it resolved, the situation with the cattle, for now?" He crossed to the sideboard and poured himself a small measure of whiskey. "We repaired the fence and moved his cattle back to his property. He claimed it was an accident, but we both know better." Mrs. Norwood mentioned threats. Preston took a seat opposite her, the firelight casting his features into sharp relief. "Blackwell likes to talk. Most of it's just hot air. But not all of it." He studied his glass. "No, not all of it. He's desperate. His ranch is failing, and he blames everyone but himself. And he wants your water. The North Creek would double the value of his property. He's offered to buy it 3 times, each offer more insulting than the last." Preston took a sip of whiskey. "I won't sell. That water has been part of the Diamond R since my father's time." "Of course you shouldn't sell," Olivia agreed. "But if he's dangerous, I can handle Blackwell." Preston's tone left no room for argument. He finished his whiskey and set the glass aside. "Enough about him. How was your day?" Olivia recognized the deliberate change of subject and respected it. "Productive. I've nearly finished reorganizing the quarterly accounts, and Emma rolled over twice. She's getting stronger every day." Preston's expression softened at the mention of the baby. "She's remarkable. You're doing a fine job with her, especially under difficult circumstances." "She makes it easy," Olivia said. "She's a happy child by nature, like her mother." The words seemed to surprise Preston as much as they did Olivia. He looked away, then stood. "It's late. We should both get some rest." Olivia rose as well, suddenly aware of the intimacy of their situation alone in the darkened house, speaking softly by firelight. "Yes, of course. Good night, Mr. Reed." "Good night, Mrs. Winters." He hesitated, then added, "I'm glad you were here when I returned. It was comforting." The simple admission lingered in Olivia's mind as she climbed the stairs to her room. There had been something in his voice, a vulnerability she hadn't heard before. It touched her in a way she hadn't expected, and if she were honest, in a way that frightened her a little. She was beginning to care too much about Preston Reed, and caring too much was dangerous. The following days brought increased activity to the ranch as preparations began for the fall roundup. Additional hands were hired, supplies ordered, and horses conditioned for the demanding work ahead. Preston was often out from dawn until dusk, returning to the house only for late dinners and brief conversations before exhaustion claimed him. Olivia continued her work on the accounts, but found herself missing their afternoon rides and chess games. Emma, now crawling with enthusiastic determination, provided welcome distraction. But Olivia couldn't deny the hollow feeling that accompanied Preston's absences. One evening, after a week of seeing him only at mealtimes, Olivia was reading in the sitting room when Preston appeared in the doorway, looking less tired than he had in days. "Mrs. Winters," he said, "I've been neglecting my host duties." She looked up from her book. "Not at all. You've been busy with important work. Nevertheless," he continued, entering the room, "I wondered if you might join me for a ride tomorrow. There's something I'd like to show you." Olivia felt a surprising leap of pleasure at the invitation. "I'd like that very much." "Good." He seemed relieved, as if he'd been uncertain of her response. "Mrs. Norwood has already volunteered to watch Emma. We'll leave after breakfast if that suits you." "It does. Thank you." The next morning dawned clear and crisp, with the first hint of autumn in the air. Olivia dressed in the riding clothes Mrs. Norwood had altered for her, a practical split skirt and sturdy blouse that allowed for comfortable horsemanship without sacrificing modesty. Preston was waiting by the barn, 2 horses saddled and ready. He looked different, somehow more relaxed, his usual gravity lightened by what almost seemed like anticipation. "You look well," he said as he helped her mount Daisy. "Ranch life agrees with you." "It does," Olivia admitted, "far more than I expected." They rode east, away from the main ranch operations, following a narrow trail that wound through stands of aspen trees already beginning to turn gold with the changing season. Preston set an easy pace, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his childhood adventures in these woods. After an hour's ride, they emerged from the trees onto a high meadow. A small, crystal-clear lake occupied the center, its surface reflecting the blue sky and surrounding mountains with mirror-like perfection. "It's beautiful," Olivia breathed, reining in beside Preston. "My father called it heaven's mirror," Preston said, dismounting. "He brought my mother here when he proposed, said if there was a more perfect spot on earth he hadn't found it." Olivia slid from her saddle, accepting Preston's steadying hand. "Thank you for sharing it with me." "I come here when I need to think," he explained, leading her toward the shore. "It helps clear my mind." They walked in comfortable silence along the lake's edge, the horses grazing contentedly behind them. Preston seemed to be gathering his thoughts, and Olivia gave him the space to do so, taking in the tranquil beauty of the hidden meadow. Finally, he stopped, turning to face her. "Mrs. Winters, Olivia, I have a proposition to discuss with you." The use of her given name startled her. In the weeks she'd been at the Diamond R, he had never called her anything but Mrs. Winters. "Yes," she said, suddenly nervous. "You've been at the ranch nearly a month now," he began, his voice measured. "In that time, you've reorganized my accounts, helped Mrs. Norwood with household matters, and generally made yourself indispensable." "I've tried to earn my keep," Olivia said carefully. "You've done far more than that." Preston took a deep breath. "I'd like to offer you a permanent position at the Diamond R." Olivia stared at him. "Permanent?" "Yes. As my ranch manager. You have a head for figures that I lack, and you understand ranching operations. With the business expanding, I need someone I can trust to oversee the accounts and help make decisions." He rushed on, as if afraid she might interrupt. "The position would come with a salary, of course a good one. You and Emma would continue to have your rooms in the main house, and there would be additional benefits. Mr. Reed," Olivia cut in gently. "This is very generous, but please consider it carefully before you answer," he said, his expression earnest. "I know you plan to move on eventually to find work in a town, but Emma thrives at the ranch and you seem content there. And frankly, I don't know how I managed before you arrived." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "You managed very well from what I can see. Not as well as you might think." He looked out over the lake, his profile strong against the backdrop of mountains. "The ranch was my father's dream, not mine. I took it on out of duty, and while I've grown to love it, there are days when the responsibility weighs heavily." "What was your dream?" Olivia asked softly. A faint smile crossed his face. "Law. I studied for a year in St. Louis before my father fell ill. I had to return home, and after he died." Preston shrugged. "The ranch needed me. You could have sold it." "Never." The word was emphatic. "It's more than land and cattle. It's my family's legacy." Olivia understood then the burden he carried, the loneliness of his position. "And now you want me to share that burden?" Preston turned to her, his eyes intent. "I want to offer you and Emma security, a home, and yes, I'd welcome your help with the ranch, but only if it's what you want too." The offer was tempting more than tempting. The Diamond R had begun to feel like home in a way no place had since her parents' house in Boston. Emma was thriving, and Olivia had found satisfaction in the work. And Preston? That was the complication. Her feelings for Preston Reed had grown beyond gratitude or even friendship. She found herself watching for him, anticipating their conversations, enjoying his quiet strength and unexpected moments of humor. It was dangerous territory for a woman who had sworn not to depend on a man again. "I need time to consider," she said finally. "It's a significant decision." "Of course." Preston nodded, looking relieved that she hadn't refused outright. "Take all the time you need." They ate the lunch Mrs. Norwood had packed for them by the lakeside, their conversation turning to lighter topics, books they had both read, memories of childhood adventures, plans for the upcoming roundup. The tension of the earlier discussion gradually faded, replaced by the easy companionship they had developed over the past weeks. As they prepared to return to the ranch, Preston helped Olivia mount her horse, his hands lingering briefly at her waist. The contact, though brief, sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. "Thank you for bringing me here," she said, gathering the reins. "It truly is a special place." "Thank you for coming," he replied simply. "It's been too long since I shared it with anyone." The ride back was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. Olivia's mind churned with the implications of Preston's offer. A permanent position at the Diamond R would provide the security she craved for Emma. No more uncertainty, no more fear of what tomorrow might bring, but there was risk too. What if her growing feelings for Preston were one-sided? What if he came to regret his generosity? What if, and this fear ran deepest, she allowed herself to depend on him, only to be abandoned again? They reached the ranch as the sun was beginning to set, the buildings gilded in golden light. Mrs. Norwood greeted them at the door, Emma balanced on her hip. "There you are. How was your ride?" she asked, her knowing glance moving between them. "Lovely," Olivia replied, reaching for her daughter. Emma came to her eagerly, babbling her delight at the reunion. "Has she been good?" "An angel, as always," Mrs. Norwood assured her. "Crawled all over the kitchen while I baked, then took a nice long nap." Preston excused himself to check on some ranch business, leaving Olivia with the distinct impression that he was giving her space to process their conversation. She appreciated the gesture, taking Emma upstairs for her evening routine. As she bathed and dressed the baby for bed, Olivia found herself examining the room with new eyes. If she accepted Preston's offer, this would be their home not temporarily, but permanently. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Emma fell asleep quickly, exhausted from her day of exploration. Olivia sat beside the cradle, watching her daughter's peaceful breathing and contemplating the decision before her. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Norwood entered, carrying a tray with tea and fresh baked cookies. "Thought you might like a little something before dinner," she said, setting the tray on a small table. and perhaps some company if you're not too tired." Olivia smiled gratefully. "Both would be welcome, Mrs. Norwood poured the tea, then settled into a chair opposite Olivia. "Mr. Reed told me about his offer," she said without preamble. "I thought he might," Olivia replied, unsurprised. Preston clearly trusted the housekeeper implicitly. "He values your opinion highly," Mrs. Norwood continued. "And not just about ranch matters." She fixed Olivia with a penetrating look. "He's changed since you arrived, for the better." "I've only been here a month," Olivia protested mildly, "long enough to make an impression." Mrs. Norwood sipped her tea. "Before you came, he worked from dawn until midnight, never taking a moment for himself. He ate at his desk more often than not. Now he finds time for chess games and rides to the lake." Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "He's been kind to us." "It's more than kindness, dear," Mrs. Norwood's voice softened. "I've known Preston Reed since he was a boy. He doesn't open his home or himself easily. Yet he brought you here without hesitation, a woman and child he found crying in the rain." "He would have done the same for anyone in distress," Olivia said. "Perhaps. But he wouldn't have asked just anyone to stay permanently." Mrs. Norwood set down her teacup. "I'm not trying to influence your decision, only to ensure you have all the facts before you make it." "What facts am I missing?" Olivia asked, curious despite herself. "That in the 10 years since his parents died, Preston has devoted himself entirely to this ranch. No social visits, no courting, barely even a day off." Mrs. Norwood leaned forward slightly. "Until you arrived. Now he finds reasons to be in the house instead of always in the fields. He joins us for meals instead of eating in his office. He smiles more in a day than he used to in a month." Olivia absorbed this information silently, turning it over in her mind. "Just something to consider," Mrs. Norwood said, rising. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. Mr. Reed had to ride out again. One of the new hands had an accident with a horse, but he should be back by then." After the housekeeper left, Olivia remained by Emma's cradle, Mrs. Norwood's words echoing in her thoughts. Could Preston's interest be more than professional? The possibility both thrilled and frightened her. Thomas had been charming and attentive during their courtship, full of grand plans and sweeping declarations. Preston was entirely different, steady, reliable, his emotions contained rather than displayed. But which was the truer measure of a man's character? Dinner that evening was quieter than usual. Preston returned just as they were sitting down, looking tired but satisfied that the injured ranch hand would recover fully. The conversation remained general ranch business, preparations for winter, a letter Mrs. Norwood had received from her sister in St. Louis. After the meal, Preston excused himself to complete some paperwork, and Olivia retired early, pleading fatigue from the day's ride. In truth, she needed solitude to sort through her thoughts. As she prepared for bed, Olivia found herself standing before the small mirror in her room, studying her reflection. The woman who looked back at her was different from the desperate figure who had trudged through the rain a month ago. Her face had filled out slightly, the haunted look in her eyes replaced by something calmer, more assured. Her hair, once dull with stress and poor nutrition, now shone with health. The diamond R had been good for her, good for Emma. Could it continue to be so if she accepted Preston's offer? And what of Preston himself? Mrs. Norwood's observations suggested feelings beyond professional respect or friendly concern. If that were true, how did Olivia feel about it? She thought of his steady presence, his quiet strength, the way his rare smiles transformed his serious face. She thought of their chess games and conversations, the respect with which he treated her opinions, the gentleness he showed Emma. And she thought of Thomas, his broken promises, his easy lies, the final betrayal of abandonment. Preston Reed was nothing like Thomas Becker. But did that mean she could trust him with her future and, more importantly, with Emma's? Olivia slept fitfully, her dreams a confused mixture of rain-soaked roads and sun-dappled lakes. She woke early, her decision still unmade. After breakfast, she took Emma to the garden behind the house, letting the baby explore the late summer blooms under her watchful eye. The morning was perfect, clear skies, gentle breeze, birdsong filling the air. Emma crawled happily from plant to plant, occasionally pulling herself up to stand wobbling against a bench or tree. "She'll be walking soon," Preston's voice came from behind her. Olivia turned to find him watching them, a fond expression on his face. "Yes, she's determined to be mobile as quickly as possible." He crossed to join them, crouching down to Emma's level. The baby immediately crawled toward him, reaching up with a delighted gurgle. Preston lifted her effortlessly, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. "Hello, Miss Emma," he said gravely. "Exploring the garden this morning, I see." Emma responded by patting his face with her small hands, a gesture of affection she had recently developed. Preston's smile in response was unguarded and warm. Looking at them, this strong, serious man and her daughter so comfortable in his arms, Olivia felt something shift inside her. A certainty that had been building quietly beneath her doubts. "I've been thinking about your offer," she said. Preston's eyes met hers, his expression carefully neutral. "And I have some conditions." A flicker of hope crossed his face. "I'm listening. First, I want it clear that this is a business arrangement. I'll manage the accounts and help with ranch decisions, but I need my independence." Olivia squared her shoulders. "I want my own savings account in the bank in Sweetwater with my salary deposited directly." Preston nodded. "Of course, that's reasonable." "Second, I want to learn more about ranching, not just the books but the practical aspects. I want to understand every part of the operation." "I'd expect nothing less," he said, a hint of approval in his voice. "Third," Olivia continued, "I need to know that Emma and I are truly welcome, not just tolerated or pitied." Preston shifted Emma to his other arm, his expression growing serious. "Olivia, you and Emma have never been objects of pity. From the moment you arrived, you've contributed to this ranch in ways I couldn't have imagined. Your presence here is—" He paused, searching for the right words. "A blessing I hadn't expected." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Olivia felt her resolve wavering. "There's something else, something Mrs. Norwood implied last night." Preston's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did she say?" "That your interest in my staying might be more than professional." A flush crept up his neck. "Mrs. Norwood sometimes speaks too freely." "Is she wrong?" Olivia pressed, needing clarity. Preston was silent for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. "No," he finally said. "She's not wrong, but that doesn't change the terms of my offer. Your position here is not contingent on anything personal." Relief mingled with another emotion Olivia wasn't ready to name. "Thank you for your honesty." "Always," he promised. Then, more hesitantly, "Does that affect your decision?" Olivia looked at him, holding her daughter, at the ranch spread out behind him, at the life that could be theirs. "Yes," she said softly. "It does." Preston's expression tightened, preparing for rejection. "I accept your offer," Olivia continued, "with my conditions, and with the understanding that whatever else might develop between us will happen slowly, if at all." The tension drained from his face, replaced by cautious happiness. "Agreed on all counts." Emma, sensing the shift in atmosphere, bounced in Preston's arms, babbling excitedly. They both laughed, the moment of solemnity broken. "It seems Emma approves of our arrangement," Preston said, smiling at the baby. "She's always been a good judge of character." Olivia replied, returning his smile. That evening they celebrated Olivia's new position with a special dinner prepared by Mrs. Norwood, who made no effort to hide her satisfaction with the outcome. The foreman and senior ranch hands were invited to join them, and Preston formally introduced Olivia as the Diamond Artique's new manager. The men were initially surprised. A female ranch manager was virtually unheard of, but their respect for Preston and the improvements they'd already seen in the ranch's organization since Olivia's arrival ensured their acceptance. As autumn deepened into winter, Olivia grew more confident in her role. Preston was true to his word, teaching her every aspect of ranching operations. She accompanied him to cattle auctions, learning to assess bloodlines and condition. She rode with the hands during the fall roundup, observing the complex process of gathering, sorting, and driving the herd. She negotiated with merchants in Sweetwater for winter supplies, earning respect for her shrewd bargaining. The books thrived under her management. By December, the ranch's finances were more organized than they had ever been, with clear records of income, expenses, and projections for the coming year. The bank in Sweetwater was so impressed with the improvements that they offered Preston a larger line of credit for expansion. Emma continued to flourish. She took her first steps just before Thanksgiving, toddling unsteadily from Olivia to Preston as they sat before the fire one evening. Her vocabulary grew daily, with Mama soon joined by Pon, her attempt at Preston, and Nora, for Mrs. Norwood. Christmas approached with a quiet excitement. The ranch hands decorated the bunkhouse with pine boughs and homemade ornaments, while Mrs. Norwood transformed the main house into a festive haven. Olivia helped, finding joy in the traditions she had missed during her difficult years with Thomas. Preston rode to Sweetwater 3 days before Christmas, returning with his saddlebags full of mysterious packages that disappeared immediately into his office. That evening, as they sat by the fire after Emma had been put to bed, he seemed unusually thoughtful. "Is something troubling you?" Olivia asked, looking up from her embroidery. Preston set aside the ranch journal he'd been reviewing. "Not troubling, no. I've been thinking about your first condition that our arrangement remains strictly business." Olivia's hand stilled. "Yes, I've respected that boundary," he continued. "These past months I've tried to be nothing more than your employer and, I hope, your friend." "You have been," she assured him. "A good employer and a valued friend." Preston nodded, seemingly gathering his thoughts. "The thing is, Olivia, my feelings haven't changed. If anything, they've grown stronger as I've come to know you better." He met her eyes directly. "I find myself wondering if yours might have changed as well." The question hung between them, earnest and unavoidable. Olivia set her embroidery aside, considering her response carefully. "When I came here," she began slowly, "I was broken in ways I didn't fully understand. Thomas hadn't just abandoned me physically, he had destroyed my ability to trust, to believe in anyone's constancy." She looked into the fire, its flames reflecting in her eyes. "I needed time to heal, to find myself again. And now," Preston's voice was quiet, Olivia met his gaze, "now I know my own strength. I've built a life here, a position I'm proud of. Emma is happy and secure." She took a deep breath. "And yes, my feelings have changed too." Hope flickered across Preston's face. "How so?" "I care for you," she said simply. "More than I thought possible, more than I was ready to admit even to myself." Preston moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. "Olivia, I don't want to rush you. I know you've been hurt, and I would never intentionally add to that pain. But I need you to know that what I feel for you and Emma is real and lasting." "I believe you," she whispered, and realized with some surprise that she truly did. Months of watching Preston's steady character, his unfailing kindness and integrity, had gradually rebuilt her capacity for trust. "May I court you properly, then?" he asked. "No more pretense that we're just employer and employee." Olivia felt a smile spreading across her face. "I would like that very much." Preston raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "That's the best Christmas gift I could receive." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, the ranch blanketed in fresh snow that sparkled in the sunlight. Olivia woke to Emma's excited babbling from the cradle, which had long since been replaced by a small bed appropriate for a growing toddler. "Mama, up," Emma demanded, standing in her bed with her arms outstretched. Olivia laughed, lifting her daughter and covering her face with kisses. "Merry Christmas, my love." They dressed in their finest clothes, Olivia in a deep green dress Preston had ordered from Denver as part of her first salary. Emma in a red velvet dress Mrs. Norwood had sewn for the occasion. Olivia arranged Emma's dark curls with a matching ribbon, marveling at how much her daughter had grown and changed in the months since they had arrived at the Diamond R. Downstairs, Preston and Mrs. Norwood were waiting by the Christmas tree, a magnificent pine from the ranch property, decorated with homemade ornaments, strings of cranberries, and real candles to be lit that evening. Packages were arranged beneath it, far more than Olivia had expected. "Merry Christmas," Preston greeted them, his eyes warming as they took in Olivia and Emma. He was dressed in his best suit, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. "Pawn," Emma exclaimed, reaching for him. Preston took her with a laugh, lifting her high before settling her on his hip. "Merry Christmas, Miss Emma," he said solemnly. "Shall we see what Santa brought you?" The morning was filled with delight as Emma opened her gifts, a wooden rocking horse Preston had commissioned from a craftsman in Sweetwater, a collection of carved animals, soft leather shoes for her newly walking feet, and a tiny porcelain tea set from Mrs. Norwood. Olivia received practical gifts from the housekeeper: knitted gloves, a warm shawl, a new journal for her accounts, and from Preston, a stunning leather-bound collection of Shakespeare's works, and a delicate gold locket containing miniature portraits of herself and Emma that he had somehow arranged to have painted from photographs. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the locket with trembling fingers. "Thank you." Preston helped her fasten it around her neck, his fingers lingering briefly against her skin. "I have one more gift," he said, "but it will have to wait until later." His tone held a promise that sent a pleasant shiver through Olivia. Their courtship thus far had been conducted with old-fashioned propriety-chaperoned rides, conversations by the fire with Mrs. Norwood knitting nearby, a few stolen moments of hand-holding when they thought themselves unobserved. But there had been a growing tension between them, a deepening of feeling that both acknowledged but had not yet fully expressed. After breakfast, they bundled up against the cold and visited the bunkhouse to distribute gifts to the ranch hands: new gloves, scarves, tobacco, and books. The men had prepared coffee and their own modest celebration, complete with harmonica music and surprisingly good singing. They presented Olivia with a handcrafted wooden box for her accounting ledgers, its surface carved with the Diamond R brand and decorated with intricate flowering vines. "The flowers were Miller's idea," Jackson, the foreman, explained gruffly. "Said a lady's box shouldn't be all business." "It's perfect," Olivia assured them, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness of men who had initially viewed her with skepticism. They returned to the house for Christmas dinner, a feast of roast goose, potatoes, winter vegetables from the root cellar, and Mrs. Norwood's famous apple pie. Emma, overwhelmed by the excitement of the day, fell asleep in Preston's arms before dessert was served. He carried her upstairs to her bed with a tenderness that made Olivia's heart ache with emotion. When he returned, Mrs. Norwood was clearing the table. "I'll finish up here," she said with a meaningful glance between them. "Why don't you two enjoy the fire in the sitting room?" Preston offered Olivia his arm. "Shall we?" The sitting room was warm and inviting, the Christmas tree candles now lit and casting a magical glow across the room. A fire crackled in the hearth, and through the windows they could see fresh snow beginning to fall. "A perfect Christmas," Olivia said, taking a seat on the small sofa near the fire. "Almost perfect," Preston replied, reaching into his pocket. "I still have one gift to give." He joined her on the sofa, turning to face her directly. "Olivia, these past months have been the happiest of my life. Having you and Emma here has transformed the Diamond R from a place of work into a true home." Olivia felt her pulse quicken. "It's become our home too." "I want it to be your home permanently," Preston said, his voice deepening with emotion. "Not as my ranch manager, but as my wife." He withdrew a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring, a single perfect diamond set in gold, flanked by smaller sapphires that matched the blue of his eyes. "This was my mother's," he explained. "My father gave it to her at Heaven's Mirror, the lake where I took you. It would honor me beyond words if you would accept it, and with it, my promise to love and cherish you and Emma for all the days of my life." Tears filled Olivia's eyes, not of sadness but of overwhelming joy. "Preston, I know it hasn't been long," he continued, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "If you need more time, I understand. But I love you, Olivia. I think I've loved you since I found you in the rain with Emma in your arms. I just didn't know it yet." Olivia reached out to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "I don't need more time," she said softly. "I love you too, and yes, I will marry you." Preston's face transformed with happiness. He slid the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that conveyed all the emotion words couldn't express. Olivia returned the kiss with equal fervor, her heart feeling as if it might burst with joy. When they finally separated, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "You've made me the happiest man in Montana territory." "And I'm the happiest woman," she replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "From despair to this perfect joy, it seems impossible." "Not impossible," Preston said, kissing her again lightly. "Just meant to be." They were married in the spring, when the ranch was in full bloom and the mountains still wore caps of snow against the azure sky. The ceremony was held at Heaven's Mirror, with a small gathering of friends from the ranch and Sweetwater in attendance. Emma, now walking confidently and chattering constantly, served as flower girl, scattering petals with enthusiastic abandon. Olivia wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from Denver, her hair adorned with wildflowers gathered that morning. Preston, handsome in a new black suit, watched her approach with an expression of such love and wonder that several of the hardened ranch hands were seen to wipe suspiciously at their eyes. They spoke their vows beneath an arch of spring blossoms, promising to love and honor each other through all the seasons to come. When the circuit preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Preston kissed his bride with a tenderness that spoke of forever, then lifted Emma into their embrace, the three of them now officially a family. The celebration continued at the ranch, with tables set up on the wide lawn and lanterns hanging from the trees. There was music from fiddles and harmonicas, dancing that lasted well into the night, and toasts to the happiness of the new family. Later, after the guests had departed and Emma slept soundly in her bed, now moved to a room adjoining the master bedroom, Preston and Olivia stood on the porch of their home, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "Happy, Mrs. Reed?" Preston asked, his arm around her waist. "Completely," Olivia replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't quite believe how much has changed in less than a year, from that rainy day on the road to this perfect night." "I thank God every day for leading me to you," Preston said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You and Emma are my greatest blessings." "And you are ours," Olivia said, turning in his arms to face him. "My steady, honorable cowboy who lifted us onto his horse and into a new life." Preston smiled, drawing her closer. "A life we'll build together day by day." "Together," Olivia agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him under the Montana stars. 5 years later, the Diamond R had prospered beyond even Preston's ambitious dreams. Under Olivia's management, the ranch had expanded its operations to include breeding horses as well as cattle, with a line of quality stock that commanded premium prices throughout the territory. The main house had been enlarged to accommodate their growing family. Emma, now 6, had been joined by 3-year-old twins James and William, and baby Catherine, just 6 months old. On a warm summer afternoon, Olivia sat on the porch, Catherine asleep in her arms, watching as Preston taught Emma to ride her own pony in the paddock nearby. The little girl sat straight and confident in the saddle, her dark curls bouncing as she guided the gentle pony through its paces. "Look, Mama," Emma called, waving excitedly. "I'm doing it all by myself, wonderful darling," Olivia called back, smiling at her daughter's accomplishment. Preston stood nearby, his posture alert but relaxed, ready to assist if needed but allowing Emma the independence to develop her skills. He caught Olivia's eye across the yard and smiled, a private communication of shared pride and joy. The twins emerged from the barn, where they had been helping Jackson with the new foal, an activity that likely involved more questions than actual assistance. They raced toward the porch, their small boots raising puffs of dust. "Mama, the baby horse stood up," James announced breathlessly. "And he has a white star right here," William added, pointing to his own forehead. "That sounds exciting," Olivia said, shifting Catherine to make room for the boys to climb up beside her. "Did you thank Mr. Jackson for letting you watch?" "Yes, madam," they chorused, their identical faces solemn. Though they shared the same features, James had inherited Preston's serious demeanor, while William approached life with Olivia's more contemplative nature. Mrs. Norwood appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Though her hair had turned completely silver, she remained an energetic and essential part of the household. "Lemonade for thirsty cowboys," she offered, presenting a tray with glasses. The twins accepted eagerly, their earlier decorum forgotten in the excitement of a sweet treat. Olivia took a glass as well, smiling her thanks to the woman who had become like a mother to her over the years. Preston and Emma joined them, the little girl chattering about her riding lesson while Preston listened with patient attention. He took a seat beside Olivia on the porch swing, one arm draped casually around her shoulders. "She's a natural," he said quietly, nodding toward Emma. "Better balance than most of the hands." "She has an excellent teacher," Olivia replied, leaning slightly into his embrace. Preston smiled, dropping a kiss on Catherine's downy head before turning his attention to the twins and their excited account of the new foal. He answered their questions with the same seriousness he would have accorded an adult, a quality that endeared him to all his children. As the afternoon light turned golden, casting long shadows across the ranch yard, Olivia gazed at her family with a heart full of gratitude. From the darkest moment of her life, alone on a muddy road in the pouring rain, with nothing but a baby and despair, had come this abundance of love and security. She thought often of that day, of the stranger on horseback who had stopped when others would have passed by, who had seen not a burden but a fellow human in need. Preston had given her shelter from the storm, yes, but more importantly, he had given her the space and support to rebuild her confidence and find her strength. Their life wasn't without challenges. Ranching remained a demanding profession, subject to the whims of weather, markets, and occasionally difficult neighbors. But they faced each challenge together, their partnership stronger for the trust and respect that formed its foundation. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and the house had quieted, Olivia and Preston sat together on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Montana sky. These moments of peaceful companionship had become a cherished ritual, a time to reconnect at the end of busy days. "I had a letter from the bank today," Preston said, his fingers idly stroking Olivia's hand where it rested in his. "They've approved the loan for the new irrigation system." "That's wonderful news," Olivia replied. "It will make such a difference for the South pastures." Preston nodded. "Your projections convinced them. As usual, your figures were more persuasive than my arguments." Olivia laughed softly. "A partnership of complementary skills, just as we promised." "More than I ever dreamed possible," Preston said, his voice deepening with emotion. "Do you know what today is?" Olivia thought for a moment, then realized. 6 years since you found us on the road. 6 years since my life truly began," he corrected gently. "I thought I was rescuing you and Emma that day. I didn't understand that you were rescuing me too." "How so?" Olivia asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "I was existing, not living," Preston explained. "Running the ranch because it was my duty, going through each day with purpose but without joy." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. "You and Emma brought laughter back into this house. You reminded me that success means nothing without someone to share it with." Olivia reached up to touch his face, tracing the familiar contours with tender fingers. "We built this life together, Preston, each of us bringing what the other needed." "And what we needed most was each other," he said, capturing her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. "I thank God every day for the storm that brought you to me." "As do I," Olivia whispered, leaning forward to meet his kiss. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, witnesses to the love that had blossomed from a moment of compassion on a rain-soaked road. A cowboy, a woman, a baby, strangers brought together by chance and bound now by choice, by family, by a shared dream that had exceeded all they had dared to hope. And on the Diamond R, where that dream had taken root and flourished, Olivia and Preston Reed continued to build their legacy of love, season by season, day by day, together.